Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER Attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. The governor says he's concerned about increasing coronavirus hospitalizations, so the state is pressing pause on its reopening plan.
It's a very volatile environment out there around the country, and it is in the state of Indiana as well.
The commission that oversees the state's utilities says power companies can't raise customers' rates to recover revenue from lower energy demand during the pandemic. Craft breweries that were booming prior to the pandemic are emerging from the quarantine into a new reality.
This is kind of a wake-up call to a lot of us.
Coming up, how craft breweries are adapting their business models to survive the pandemic. And 4th of July festivities may be canceled, but local fireworks sales are booming. Those stories and more right now on Indiana Newsdesk.
Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Perry Metz, in tonight for Joe Wren. Indiana's governor says he's worried about a possible increase in coronavirus cases, so he's pressing pause on moving the state into the next phase of reopening. Indiana was supposed to lift its capacity limits at restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues this weekend, but as Joe Wren reports, the governor says the state needs at least a couple more weeks.
At the beginning of May, the governor issued his back-on-track plan to slowly reopen the economy in stages. His goal was to eliminate all the COVID restrictions by July 4th. For the most part, the state has been opening earlier than what the governor originally projected. But this week he said it's time to slow down and press pause because of recent upticks in hospitalization rates and the percentage of Hoosiers testing positive for the virus.
It's a very volatile environment out there around the country, and it is in the state of Indiana as well. We're not immune to that fact.
State Health Department statistics on Wednesday showed a 12% increase in coronavirus hospitalizations since last Friday. The pause means the state will continue its current 250-person limit on social gatherings. Restaurant dining rooms will still be restricted to 75% capacity, and bars, nightclubs, bowling alleys, museums, and amusement parks will continue to operate at half capacity. The governor says he'll keep the restrictions in place through at least July 18th. However, in what Holcomb calls Stage 4.5, fairs, festivals, carnivals, and conventions will be allowed to reopen for the first time, provided they follow some COVID-19 safety precautions. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Joe Wren.
The latest numbers from the Indiana State Department of Health show about 47,000 Hoosiers have tested positive for COVID-19 and about 2,500 have died. About 500,000 Hoosiers have been tested so far. That's about 13% of the state's population. The percentage of tests that return positive is about 10%. Indiana health officials plan to release statistics on coronavirus infections and deaths at individual nursing homes later this month. As we've reported, nearly half of the state's deaths come from long-term care facilities. Unlike most states, including all of Indiana's neighbors, the ISDH has refused for months to release facility-level COVID-19 data.
As we have all learned, responding to this pandemic requires us to continually evaluate our approaches and, when appropriate, to change them. This is one of those times.
AARP Indiana was one of the groups calling on the state to release the information. The association is happy the data are being released now, but says it should have happened months ago. COVID-19 patients are spending more time in the ICU than the average patient. Research shows these longer stays put patients at increased risk for post-intensive care syndrome.
For the patient, this includes a constellation of symptoms, which are psychological, cognitive, and physical. And all of these symptoms can decrease the quality of life for the patient.
Wong estimates more than 70% of older people discharged from the ICU will develop delirium. It's likely because patients are often sedated for weeks if they're on a ventilator. Delirium can also cause anxiety and depression and have long-term effects on a person's memory. Utilities won't be allowed to disconnect service for unpaid customers until mid-August. The governor extended the moratorium on shutoffs this week. And as Rebecca Thiel reports, it applies to all the utilities in the state, even those that are small or rural.
On Monday, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission ordered some utilities to continue the moratorium on shutoffs through August 14th. But the order only applied to utilities the IURC oversees. Several small, unregulated utilities, including some rural electric cooperatives, aren't under the IURC's jurisdiction. One day after the IURC issued the order, Governor Eric Holcomb extended the moratorium on shutoffs until August 14th for all utilities in the state. The IURC also denied a request to let utilities recover revenue from lower energy demand during the pandemic. The agency says it might consider letting utilities recover other losses due to COVID-19, but it said it's unreasonable to make customers pay for energy they didn't use.
It was an extraordinary, if not absurd, request in the wake of everything going on, and shame on the utilities for even suggesting that they wanted to collect that money. But kudos to the commission for closing that door and saying absolutely not.
The IURC will also require utilities under its jurisdiction to offer extended payment plans to its customers of at least 6 months.
Here to talk with us about the moratorium on utility shutoffs is Energy and Environment reporter Rebecca Thiel. Now, Rebecca, it seems like this has all happened so quickly. On Monday, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission said the utilities they oversee can't shut off power, water, or sewer for unpaid bills until August 14th. Why is it important that the governor gave the same order just a day later?
So while the IURC oversees your big utilities like Duke Energy and Vectren, they don't oversee a lot of these smaller utilities like small sewer utilities, city-owned utilities, and rural electric cooperatives.
But some electric and gas utilities in the state say they've been losing money because a lot of their big energy users, such as businesses and schools, closed down during the stay-at-home order. Why does the IURC say utilities can't recover those costs?
Basically, the agency says it's unfair to customers to make them pay for energy they didn't use. Especially because they say that the utilities didn't really prove that they need this energy to keep the lights on. Now, that being said, the IURC did say that they may let utilities recover some costs in the future, such as unpaid bills, waived fees, but we're not really sure whether or not that'll happen. Just to give you an idea, Duke Energy has about 118,000 customers, that's residents and industrial, that have unpaid bills, and that's a $117 million loss.
The agency also approved Duke Energy's rate increase, but not as much as they wanted, right?
That's right. Duke got less than half the money they requested. We went from about $390 million to just $146 million. And you have to remember, that was a big ask. The average customer would have paid $23 more per month. We don't really know what that math is right now. With this smaller increase, we'll have to wait a few weeks and see what customers would pay.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Beer sales have been way up during the pandemic, but small craft breweries get the majority of their business from their tap rooms. With that model eliminated during the lockdown, they've had to quickly adapt in order to stay afloat. Adam Pinsker reports on how the craft brewing market is evolving and whether it will be enough to keep the industry from collapsing.
On June 15th, Switchyard Brewery opened its doors to walk-in customers for the first time since March 17th, when Governor Eric Holcomb ordered all bars and restaurants to be closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Or in less than 12 hours, we reinvented our business model and we became a delivery and curbside service.
But sales from to-go beer service started to dry up after restaurants began reopening around Monroe County.
Because Switchyard does not have a kitchen, we were classified by the state of Indiana as a bar. And so we were put into phase 4 of reopening.
Switchyard owner Curtis Cummings decided to diversify by purchasing equipment to can beer and sell as six-packs, in addition to the crowlers he was already selling. Industry experts say fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic could remake the craft brewing industry altogether.
60% of our members don't have a restaurant. It's not a brew pub, it's not a whatever. Then we have a bunch that have small kitchens. I think you're going to see some folks make a decision maybe to put a kitchen in, maybe not.
Executive Director of the Brewers Guild of Indiana, Rob Caputo, says in order to survive, breweries may find themselves doing events like virtual trivia or opening on Mondays and Tuesdays, days these restaurants are typically closed.
I think it's going to be a challenge to see how things come back, when they come back. And will folks feel comfortable even going out into large crowds?
It's a different story for Our Lady of Perpetual Hops, a brewery down in New Albany. They were able to open in mid-May because they serve enough food, but getting business back on track hasn't been easy.
First 2 weeks were pretty strong considering that, but these last 2 weeks have really gotten pretty soft.
Co-owner Greg Wortham says his brewery also got into the canning game to generate some extra revenue, and because there is such a shortage of crowlers. He believes the recent slowdown in business is due to restaurants and bars opening up across the Ohio River in Louisville.
And at first, Kentucky was not open, Indiana was, so I think we were getting some people from Kentucky too.
With 10,000 square feet at his disposal, plus an outdoor patio, Wortham doesn't anticipate social distancing being an issue, but he worries that other non-COVID-19 related problems could hurt his business.
They've closed the main artery, Grant Line Road, to get to us, so that's going to be closed for 2 months. And you can still get to us, but you got the detours.
And Rob Caputo with the Brewers Guild says Indiana breweries may face more COVID-19 related roadblocks in the near future, especially if there isn't yet a vaccine.
I think the fall and the winter, again, is probably going to dictate, that social distancing if it's still heavily required. I think that's going to be the challenge when there's not people sitting outdoors.
At Switchyard, Cummings is already adapting to the changing climate by retaining beer pickup and delivery for those not yet comfortable with visiting his business, and the brewery also teamed up with Indianapolis pizzeria King Dough to add pizza to the kitchen. Cummings said he'd rather adapt than lose his business.
This is kind of a wake-up call to a lot of us in terms of beer quality, the customer experience, your position in the community.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
The Brewery Association reports new business models and government support through PPP loans have helped increase optimism among its members. But the group cautions that 17% of breweries that responded to a recent survey said they were unsure, if not actively pessimistic, about whether their businesses would make it through the end of the year. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. In about a month, some students will head back to school for the first time since March. Ahead, how Monroe County is planning for the upcoming school year. Most 4th of July events have been canceled, but that's not hampering fireworks sales. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
In a time of change, where can you find in-depth reporting and thoughtful analysis? Washington Week on PBS. Join moderator Robert Costa.
When I was at the Capitol this week, I encountered the same.
And a panel of award-winning journalists.
You're seeing a divided nation, and you're seeing.
For insights and perspective.
Tonight there was a key development in the
Senate. You won't find anywhere else.
What a week.
Washington Week.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The Monroe County Community School Board finalized its opening plan this week. It incorporates feedback from parents who submitted after reading through the first draft. Some of the biggest changes have to do with mask protocols and when students will be allowed to take them off. As Mitch Legan reports, parents have about 2 weeks to decide whether to send their students to school or enroll them in the online academy this fall.
If you were to describe MCCSC's plan for reopening schools in one word, it'd be flexible. School leaders have spent the last 3 months attempting to plan for a situation there's no playbook for. So they're trying to keep options open for whatever happens this fall.
School policies must be flexible and nimble. That's the one thing we keep telling everyone. We've got to be extremely flexible with this. This is all new territory, so it is our goal to do that.
As part of that flexibility, students will be able to learn online or in person. Many parents want to send their students back to school, but were concerned with a policy that allowed students to remove mandatory face masks unless properly socially distanced, as determined by the teacher. Now, masks may be removed under 3 circumstances: during breakfast or lunch with proper social distancing, during outdoor recess, or during a short 3 to 5 minute break with proper social distancing and desks facing the same direction. Some school board members were concerned the short breaks were too flexible, saying they could put teachers in a tough spot by giving them too much discretion on when they could remove a mask. But teachers wanted some sort of precedent set.
Because they don't want to be in the uncomfortable position of having to talk with parents who say, well, Miss Johnson said this and Mr. So-and-so said this. They really are looking to us for guidance on this so that they don't have their backs against the wall and have to make a decision that's different from one of their teacher peers.
There are still concerns about how many breaks will be allowed in a day, but officials felt the protocols could help ease teachers' concerns while acknowledging the difficulties students could have keeping masks on for an entire 8-hour school day.
Policy should be practical, feasible, and appropriate for children in adolescent developmental stages. And I know that's a difficult one sometimes, but that's certainly something that our committee held tried and true.
Infectious disease Dr. Tom Hrizamalis says masks are an important barrier to spreading COVID-19, but short breaks for younger children could be practical if proper precautions are taken.
Everything's relative, but if someone needs to take their mask off to eat or takes their mask off to blow their nose or something of that sort, that's understandable. You know, the best circumstance would be to try and do that with other people not close by.
The board discussed additional updates and changes to the reopening plan, including to the online option. Parents can now change their students' learning preference from online to in-person or vice versa within the first 2 weeks of school. After that, the next time students can switch is at the end of the semester. With the re-entry plan set, the school corporation says parents should expect to receive updated registration information early next week so they can select their preferred instructional model by July 20th. Principals will share detailed plans for their schools by July 15th. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
As sea levels rise, the nation's Atlantic and Pacific coastlines are eroding, putting homes and businesses in jeopardy. But as Rebecca Thiel reports, climate change also is increasing erosion on what's called the nation's third coast, the Great Lakes shoreline.
Powerful waves threatened houses along Ogden Dunes shore this winter. More than one of these seawalls has already failed. Without more protection, these homes will likely sink into Lake Michigan.
And what it's doing is it's been washing the sand out that we have above the wall and taking it out.
Roger Howell bought a house here about 5 years ago when lake levels were lower.
So we're in the situation where we need to do some repair up here, and we've dealt with this before. We're fine working on it. We know what to do.
But right now, they're unable to do it. The state's new national park, Indiana Dunes, says Ogden Dunes residents shouldn't be allowed to repair or build new protective barriers within what it claims are the boundaries of the park. That's why the town of Ogden Dunes has joined 50 of its residents in a lawsuit against the park and the U.S. Department of Interior, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers for failing to grant them a permit.
Basically, at our location, we've got a government-caused crisis.
Erosion isn't new for Ogden Dunes. It's been an issue for decades. Unlike communities on the east side of the lake, its beaches don't get naturally replenished with sand. That's because the Port of Indiana, where several big-name industrial companies make their home, juts out into the lake, blocking sand from reaching Ogden Dunes shore. Howell says that's why when the port was built in the 1960s, the Army Corps of Engineers recognized Ogden Dunes would need protection, things like seawalls and placing sand on the beach.
So we've got this situation where we're not able to put in the stone protection that we need, and we should be allowed to under our agreements.
But Indiana Dunes National Park argues things like seawalls and stones only protect the homes behind them. For neighbors, they can make erosion worse. This used to be part of a wheelchair-accessible walkway at Portage Lakefront and Riverwalk. 2 years ago, it collapsed due to erosion, right next to where several Ogden Dunes residents have placed protective barriers.
You may protect that spot, but you accelerate the erosion on either end of that structure. And so, well, maybe we should extend that structure. And you accelerate that, and where does it end? Is the entire 50-mile coastline of Indiana a seawall?
Lavovitz says the best way to protect buildings along the lake is to slowly move them back from the lake over time. That's not a bad idea as far as some geologists are concerned. Erin Argelon is a professor of geosciences at Indiana University Northwest and studies erosion in Northwest Indiana. She says we've gone through several periods of high lake levels along Lake Michigan. The last time was in the 80s.
Once the disaster is over, we sort of shelve the projects and don't plan or put money towards or anticipate the next inevitable time that it will happen.
In February, the town of Beverly Shores spent more than $360,000 to place sand on its beaches to combat erosion. Argelon favors this over man-made structures like seawalls. She says it doesn't make erosion worse for neighbors because it doesn't disrupt the flow of sand. But she understands why communities might be hesitant to do it.
You can't just set it and forget it. You have to watch year to year as the lake levels come up, your sand may disappear, and you may be in 3 to 5 years of needing constant, ongoing, expensive nourishment.
Fortunately, Argelon says those high lake levels don't last forever. Looking at the big picture, though, she says lakeshore communities are going to have to do more to plan for the lake's rises and falls, using mature trees and other clues along the landscape as a guide for where development could happen in the future and where it shouldn't. But that long-term planning is unlikely to comfort Ogden Dunes residents with homes along the lake.
I'm losing 3 feet at a time as a wave comes in, hits it. If I'm sitting there thinking, while I'm moving all the stuff off the patio, moving everything back, thinking, you know, I need to be prepared to take stuff out of my house, because if it gets so far, then you could lose your home.
With the courts closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're not sure when the lawsuit between Ogden Dunes and Indiana Dunes National Park might move forward. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
Most 4th of July events are canceled, but that's not hampering fireworks sales. Some retailers are reporting 200% sales increases from the same time last year. As Ethan Burks reports, some local stores are having trouble keeping up with the unprecedented demand.
Jill Smith and her family have been running Crazy Joe's quality fireworks on the south side of Bloomington for the past 5 years. They were concerned the pandemic would dramatically hurt their sales this year, but they couldn't have been more wrong.
The sales increased immediately. Our first week open, our first day open, we saw a significant increase in the amount of sales we had, the amount of customers coming in.
Smith says it's been a challenge restocking the shelves to keep up with demand. She says they've already made multiple trips to their wholesaler's warehouse to replenish supplies.
And with a lot of the shows canceling, people are wanting to do their own little show at home.
The city of Bloomington canceled its 4th of July parade and fireworks show months ago as a safety precaution.
But those kind of parades where everybody's crowded together for a period of hours can be very difficult. So that's what went into it. I think it was the right decision at that time, and it's probably going to help us avoid other problems.
The American Pyrotechnic Association says in 2019, the consumer fireworks industry set a record by selling $1 billion worth of products. They say there's no doubt sales this year will surpass that.
Due to the cancellation of all these public events that many families go to on the 4th of July, we believe more families will choose to celebrate with backyard fireworks. Right now, most retailers are saying that their sales are double or triple what they were a year ago. So that sets this up for being an all-time high, record-breaking year.
Meanwhile, the Smith family is considering hiring some extra hands to help them out over the weekend.
We're going to be ready for a break come Sunday, July 5th.
But economists say they doubt the increase will be long-lasting. They expect sales to drop off dramatically after pandemic restrictions are lifted. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Burks.
On the 4th of July, the window for fireworks is 10 a.m. until midnight. If you want to start tonight, state law says you can only set them off between 5 p.m. and 2 hours after sunset. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a safe and happy holiday weekend. Happy 4th.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.